Today I'm going to try and get a couple of these pins started turning and finished, showing you my way. It might not be the best way, but it's the way I do it. And like we all do, we have the choice if we're going to use or adapt it to what works best for us. Hi, my name's Kevin Carpenter, and this is my shop. I use this small itty bitty 3520 Powermatic wood lathe for turning pens. I've had the lathe for about 4 years now, and it has done all I've asked it to do. That's part of my indoor wood pile. These three pieces here I'm going to be using to make today. Stand by. Okay, now that we've got our pen blanks cut to size and marked to show the orientation of the wood so that the grain will match when we put it on the pen. Once we put this on the mandrel, get our tubes glued in, we can start turning. But first we've got to drill a hole where we're going to glue our brass tubes into. Now we have our pen blanks drilled, and as you can see, we have the lines matching so that we know how to orientate the blanks on the mandrel. These are the pen kits I'll be using today. These are European style pen kits. Alright, what we're going to do now is we're going to take the pen tubes and we're going to sand them to get a rough finish so that when you put the glue on them, you will get a good seal between the pen tube and the pen blank. This goes in like that, and hopefully you can get it out. By taking sandpaper and roughing up the outer edge of the tube, it gives it a little bite. And then I use super glue, and some people use a 2-part epoxy, but I have just as good luck with a medium density super glue. It doesn't matter what brand you use, but put the glue on there, put it in, and wait for it to harden. Alright, here I have a piece of 220 grit sandpaper. Taking my pen tube and just giving it a quick brush with the sandpaper. It gives a rough finish to the pen tube, and the glue can adhere to that a little bit better. When you glue it, you take your super glue, I do, put a little dab on the pen tube, then take the pen tube, make sure you've got the short tube for the short end of your pen blank, and you want to twist it, go in and out a little bit, twist it. They make a tool for inserting the tubes into a wooden blank or acrylic blank, but I found that a pencil works just fine, and it's a whole lot cheaper. Then you've got your second pen tube. You want to rough it up. Doesn't have to be perfect or exact. Add another drop of glue, and like that. Then put it into the blank, twisting, pushing in and out as you go. It spreads the glue around a little bit better. Take your pencil, push it in. It doesn't have to be exactly even in the blank because we're going to use a trimmer and trim that up anyway. You take your pin tubes out of the kit without losing your parts. And sometimes that can be a problem. At 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to be on your hands and knees looking around your shop for a nib or a ring or the transmission barrel. I prefer twist style pins. A click-it pin is quicker, I guess, but the twist style pin just is a little bit more professional pin. Now that I have mounted the pin blanks onto the tubes, we're now going to have the pin blanks on the mandrel. We're going to bring up the tailstock and gently tighten it about 1/8 of a turn. Check the tightness of our pin blanks on the mandrel. Make sure that they're going to drive. And now we shall use the roughing gouge and rough out the blanks to get them close to the size of the pin bushings. Here we go. When using the roughing gouge, you want to bring your blanks down fairly close to the bushings, but you don't want to take it down too far. Also with the roughing gouge, it is what it says, what it's called. It roughs out the diameter of the wood and gets it close to where you want it to be. Once you get to this point, there are several options. You can continue to use the roughing gouge to get it a little bit smaller, get a little bit closer to your bushings, or you can switch over and use a spindle gouge, which some people prefer because it's easy to use and it's not too aggressive. Myself, on the other hand, I like to use a skew. The skew that I use has an oval tool stock with an angle on the sharpened part of the skew. When using it, you want to bring your tool stock up and come in pretty much level or facing down just a little bit. When you're turning with the skew, you don't want to get too aggressive. If you cut into the wood too deep, you'll split it on the tubing. So you want to have a light hand once you're down close to the diameter that you want to bring your pins to. Once you get to this point, because of the European style pin that I'm turning, it has a ring feature, and you have to take and turn the wood down that is about the width of a parting tool. It's better to not take off too much than to have a loose fitting ring. If the ring fits a little bit snug, it's a better fit. There we go. Now it has to come over just a hair more. And a little bit more. And there we go. One of the nice things about turning with the skew is it gets the wood super smooth, and it doesn't require very much sanding once you get to this point. I don't know if you can see in the camera or not, but the wood shavings coming off of here are about as fine as flour, and that's what you want. Okay, now we have that turned down to a really nice shape. And there you go. Okay, while I was away from the camera, I started out with 400, then went to 600, now finishing up with 800 grit sandpaper. I want this pen, the texture to be really smooth. A lot of times when I turn pens, I leave them a little bit thicker on the nib end or the point. Some people prefer to have a thicker pen, but the one here that I'm turning for a friend of mine, and she prefers a really thin pen, so I want to keep it down as close as I can get it to when I'm out with the nib. So there we go. But I still prefer the finish I get by using a skew. Right now as I'm turning, I don't know if the camera's picking this up, but there's a chatter. Sometimes that chatter is caused by the type of wood, and sometimes it's also caused because your tool has gotten dull. Once again on this pen here, I'm turning it relatively thin because I have a customer, like I said on the first pen, she doesn't like them thick, so I'm turning these rather thin, and that's just her personal preference. I know some gentlemen that work in the office that buy my pens, and they like a really thin, slimline pen, which is also a twist style pen. It's all just personal preference. Some people like a very big fat pen, and I also turn those as well. And I have a couple of those that I'm going to demonstrate in my next series of videos. What I'm doing here is I'm turning the point of the wood that will meet a nib, and there's a bushing on here that I turn this pointed end of this pen blank down to. I leave it a little bit proud of the bushing, that way I can go in there and do a little bit of fine sanding if necessary and fine tune it, and it comes out perfect and it matches the nib up to the end of the pen really nice. Alright, we got that down to a pretty close to a final shape. Still a then we'll slow it down a little bit. This one came out a little bit rough. It's a piece of oak. Personally, I don't like to turn oak pins. The wood doesn't turn as nicely, in my opinion. There again, just personal preference. Alright, that looks nice, feels good. That feels good. This piece of oak that I'm using is extremely grainy, and I'm going to show you how I'm finishing this particular pin because of the graininess of the wood. I'm going to use a soulier finish or super glue. You want the spindle speed to be slow. Put a couple of drops of CA on a paper towel and then go back and forth a couple times. On the long end, put a couple of drops, go back and forth on the bigger end, then take accelerator, spritz it a couple of times, let it set for a few seconds, give the CA plenty of time to harden, put a couple more drops on a paper towel, go back and forth, put a couple more drops on the paper towel, go back and forth. You want to try and get the ridges out of the finish. Spritz that with accelerator. Let it harden for a few seconds. The number of coats that you put on is entirely up to you. With the gold finish on the trim parts, it looks really fantastic. So this here, spritz, let it set for a couple of minutes. It looks really good, but there's still some graininess in the wood that I'm not crazy about, so I'm going to put a couple more coats on there. Okay, what we're going to do now is I've got my pin kits, what's left of them. Here are the blanks that have been turned, just came off the lathe. They have a finish on them. And then we have our bags here that have the rest of the parts. In my videos I keep mentioning a nib, and this is the nib. This is what the point of the pin cartridge goes through and what you write with. Also, you have a piece here, it's called a transmission. That's for a twist style pin, the clip, and the cap of the pin. And then this is what I prefer to, or I call the beauty ring. And that's what I'm getting ready to glue on the pins now. Alright, and there we have the finished pins.